guys, it's Sam, and in this video I'm going to show you guys a quick little trick that you can do with your Copic markers with fixative. And I know not all of you guys use Copic markers, and don't worry, I don't discriminate. I also tested it with all of these brands. And if you don't use markers, well, I also covered graphite and colored pencil, so you're welcome. Alright, I know you guys are excited, so let's get started. Before I start and do anything, I want to quickly go over just what fixative I'm using, and it is the Krylon Workable Fixative. I purchased this at a Michael's store. I'm sure you can find it in many other places, and I'm sure it doesn't have to be this brand, but just to note that all the testing and experimenting and everything I've done has just been this one can. And before I get into any experimenting with all of my markers and various tools, I want to go ahead and discuss what I did last year, where I kind of just quote-unquote discovered. I'm sure other people have found this out, or you might even already know, but I wanted to just cover where I first figured it out and thought it was interesting, and I wanted to share what I did then. So this was from what I did last year. I used a mechanical pencil, a Prismacolor Cool Gray 20%, Copic C3, and Prismacolor colored pencils. This particular color was Crimson Lake. I didn't use any blending tools, I just used them kind of straight out of the box, so to speak. So this first column here is basically my control group. It's kind of what I did to show what the base of the tool that I had could do in terms of how dark I could get it to go. The second column is with one layer of spray fixative, and then another layer on top with the medium, and then the third column is a second layer, so an additional layer. And just to note that my Copic marker was a bit out of the ink at the time, so I had to refill it, and that might have affected the results just a little bit. In any case, you can kind of already see that there is a noticeable difference. To start with the graphite, I think I definitely had it lay down smoother. There was less of the white paper showing since I was able to kind of keep going over it, because with paper, if you press too hard, you're going to crush the tooth of the paper, and the fixative kind of helps bring back that texture and helps fill in that space. So that was nice for both the graphite and the colored pencil, actually. They both reacted fairly similarly, and I'm not sure if it's very easy to see on camera or not. It does obviously look different in real life, but they do get, not too significant, but they do get a touch darker with each layer. The two layers over here are a little bit difficult to see too much of a difference for all of them, but at the very least there is definitely a difference between not using any fixative and no additional layers, and then actually using fixative with an additional layer. And also note that this paper is extremely thin and probably was not the best to experiment with, but and I don't know what paper this is because I don't know what sketchbook this is. This was just a gift, and it doesn't say what kind of paper was inside, so this is kind of the basis of where I was experimenting, where I got this idea, and now let's go ahead and take a look at another round of experimenting with other mediums, or rather other brands, I should say. Alrighty then, so if it wasn't already obvious from my great lack of explaining, what this trick is a way to use fixative and a marker or a medium and be able to layer it in such a way that you can actually get darker tones from just the one supply. So this is awesome for someone who doesn't have a lot of a supply, or who can't afford a lot of supplies, or just otherwise doesn't have access to a lot of supplies. So if you, for example, only have a handful of Copic markers, and it's kind of frustrating that you can only get so much with just so little, this way you can kind of take things a step further and just explore more with what you can do with just such few supplies. So with this workable fixative, what I did was test it with Copic's several different brands of alcohol-based markers. I only had Crayola markers in terms of available water-based markers, so other water-based markers and obviously other brands of alcohol-based markers may vary. And I also did graphite, which again was a mechanical pencil, and then I did Prismacolor colored pencils, all of which could have different results on the color and the brand. I would definitely advise trying whatever mediums you have at home, just in case, there could be something there with that. But with that, I just wanted to go ahead and explain a little bit more of things to look out for, just in case you're kind of trying this, which number one most important thing is to never ever ever try something like this, something really crazy and new without actually doing a sort of test sheet first. You don't really want to do it with a more serious artwork, something you plan to love and keep forever, because with these kinds of things, you don't really know how things may react and how things may turn out. So it's best to have a test sheet of paper, and also various papers might have different results. I feel like I had different results on the older sketchbook with the unknown paper type versus the Arteza sketchbook, which is the one that I'm using for the rest of this testing. So definitely check your paper, your various supplies, the various different colors in those supplies, and the various different types of fixatives that you can use. And I actually have a link in the description to an article that kind of goes into more fixatives and talking about their differences and their pluses, their minuses. There's a whole lot more detail from someone who's way more experienced, because I have used fixative very, very little, and this person knows a lot more than I do. So I definitely recommend checking out that blog post, kind of get more information there. And also, I know not everybody has or can afford workable fixative. I have heard that hairspray works basically the same, but note that I have also heard that hairspray can yellow over time. So that's something to consider when using them with your work, that just hairspray might not be the best for something that you might want to last more long term. But also note that Copic markers and other alcohol-based markers and lots of other supplies that you could use with this are not necessarily, and Copics for sure, and other alcohol-based markers for sure, they're not light fast. And so you'll want to check around with that as well. And so basically for me, since Copic markers aren't light fast, they're not going to last a long time, they're going to fade. Using hairspray might not be all that bad, because hairspray will likely yellow over time anyway. So if you're not too concerned about those sort of things, then go for it. Obviously, for things that you use that are not light fast, please, please, please scan or take a photograph of your artwork. And if you don't have a scanner, or you don't have a high quality camera type thing to save your pictures and your drawings, you can try local libraries, or you can try print shops or office supply stores. Just be careful and definitely test things out before you do them on any artwork. As far as the experimenting goes, I just did the same thing that I showed off initially, which was the first row, which was where I didn't do anything. The first column, the second column, where I did the one spray of fixative, waited for that to dry, followed the instructions that should be on the can, or you can find them online. And then I did another layer of the same medium, and then a second round of spraying, and then a third round of layering. And with all that said, let's go ahead and talk about the results. So I've let them all dry a little bit, and here are the results. So this first page is the Copic markers, the E000, Y13, B02, G29, and of course the lack of ink in the markers definitely made them look pretty ugly over here. Adding the refill helped, but in either case, I know it's probably not too obvious on the camera, but it is in real life, I swear. But there is a bit of a difference between the first column and then the subsequent two columns. Not so much between each other over here, but between the first and these other two. There is a little bit with the blue and a touch with the yellow, but again, I had issues with refilling that might have played a factor. But even with the other two markers that I did not refill, there is still, actually this third one is still pretty darker than the second one. So it definitely depends on the color. And if these two taught me anything, it also definitely depends on how much ink you actually have in the marker. But still, it's something I would recommend trying out regardless, because I do think there is a bit of a difference, enough that it might be worth experimenting on your own to see if it's worth it for you. So it's worth it to find out if it's worth it. So here we have the other markers that I tried, the Artist Loft C9, the Prismacolor C30%, and the Daiso one, which, I mean, it's called Fluently on the marker, but I've only ever seen it sold at Daiso. You can find it on Amazon, but it's stupidly expensive. Don't get it on Amazon. This is the medium warm gray. And then the Spectrum FS2, which, I mean, even on the camera, it looks pretty obvious that how just much this one really was affected by the multiple layers of fixative. And it's probably not super obvious to see, but the Artist Loft was just a touch, if you're comparing the first and last one. It's just a touch darker. It's not too significant, but I mean, it could work for some more gradual changes. So there's still something you could do there. The Prismacolor, I think this is more to do with the paper than it is for the marker itself / the fixative, but it does have a bit of blotchiness to it. Same with the Daiso, there's a bit of blotchiness, but again, I think that's potentially more to do with the paper itself, which, by the way, just a reminder, I'm using the Arteza sketchbook, and it's not as noticeable, but it is a little bit here on the spectrum. But for sure, definitely some pretty drastically different results. Just in the end, they all definitely get darker with each, with just one iteration, but sometimes two. And finally, we have the Crayola markers, which I think show up the worst on camera. It looks 100% different in real life. This one definitely didn't seem as affected, but I still say it's affected. I know it's, again, like you can't really tell, but I swear in real life it's definitely different. Obviously this gray one is probably the most that you can tell right off the bat. That's probably because my gray marker is dying again. These are quite old markers and I did use them quite a bit up previously, so that's kind of what happened with my poor gray marker here. But hey, I guess this basically says that if you have a dead Crayola marker and you do this technique, you can definitely get back that potential. I think that's even darker than what the gray was originally anyway. So you can definitely get a more solid coverage if you use the fixative. I almost kind of wish I tried that now with my dying Copic markers, because that would have been interesting to see if it would have helped fill in that space. But something to try out on your own at home and see if using a dead marker can have similar results to this. Other than that, I think the most significant one is probably the brown, and then I would probably put the yellow before the black, because it's probably really hard to tell, but there is very subtle differences between these three. And I do think you get a more solid coverage and slightly darker of a yellow from having done this. And obviously this isn't every color, and clearly different brands react differently and different markers react differently. So I think this is 100% worth experimenting with and trying out, and I'd be really curious to hear your guys' results. Alright, and that's pretty much it for this little trick. I hope you guys found it helpful, and if you know any other tips and tricks with be it fixative or anything else, feel free to comment down below. And if you try out this trick with some of your artwork, let me know how it goes in the comments down below. And if you're new here, feel free to hit that subscribe button. And you can check me out on other social medias. I have all the links in the description down below. Usually lots of good stuff is in the description down below, so I definitely recommend giving it a glance. And I'll put all the supplies I used in this video in the description down below if you want to check it out for yourself. If you found this video helpful, definitely share it with your friends. And thanks so much for watching. Bye!